That's the Kol Mamadaka. It's interesting that we start off the year, we make a bracha l'shmoa l'kol shofar. That's the bracha, and everything is depending upon the ear. The first and the most primary mitzvah, probably the most important mitzvah in all the Torah. I guess if we had to point out and ask ourselves, what's the most important word in the whole Torah and all of Yiddishkeit? So, maybe we could identify the word that's written on the front door and the word that's written on the back door. It's the word that we say in the morning, we say at night. It's the same word that Jews shouted and declared when they were going to the gas chambers, right? And that's the word Shema, right? When children, when the parents are talking to the children, they also hit them with the same complaint. They said, if you'll listen, right? Shema, listen. That's what it's all about. And the same thing when children complain to the parents. They said, if you'd only listen. The same thing comes back in the other direction. They don't listen. They don't understand. They don't understand me. If they understood, yeah. And when teachers speak to the students, they said, if you'll just listen, please, I need you to listen. And then we go back in the other direction. We find out that the students are telling the teacher also, if you just listen. Husbands are telling wives, so listen, I'm trying to get a message, trying to get a point to you. And then the wives are also most often telling the husbands, if only he just listened. That's the biggest complaint you hear universally. He doesn't listen. That's all over the place. We turn to Kadosh Baruch Hu three times a day, and we say Shema Kolenu Hashem Elokeinu, and Hashem turns to us and also says Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Shem Echad. Listen, Israel. So you see that the whole relationship, everything is depending upon listening. This week's parsha, V'hayim Shemoa. If you're going to listen, Eikev Asher Tishmu. If you're going to listen, you see that the whole Torah and everything is depending upon one thing, and that's to listen. And therefore it's no mistake that we start off the year with opening up our ears, l'shmoa l'kol shofar. Not to hear the shofar, but hear the kol of the shofar. Interesting distinction. What the difference between listening and listening to the kol, right? I might have mentioned before that one of the most exciting days in learning that I discovered, and one of the best things that a person can find out, is that they were mechaven. That you ended up saying something that someone brings a source and says, this great person said that thing. I've been saying to my children for many years when they go to sleep at night, at the following cute onomatopoeia. You know what onomatopoeia is? Okay, I don't expect this. Not an English class. Okay, it would not be on the final exam. But onomatopoeia means that the word sounds like the thing, like the action that it does or whatever it is. Pow, smash, boom. Remember, those type of expressions. Crash. Say when a person throws a ball into the basket and it hits no rim, but it goes into the basket, it's called a swish. Right? Is it really? And also, when a fellow's tall enough to put his hand above the basket and throw the basketball down, it's called a dunk. There's a reason why in Hebrew a bottle is called a bakbuk, because because with the noise of the air coming in, it makes a sound. You'll see, it's almost hard once you realize it. It's almost hard to find a word that's not an onomatopoeia. There is a certain rhythm and cadence to language. But I've been telling my children when they go to sleep something very, very cute. And then I saw one day that the Vilna Gaon says the same thing. The Vilna Gaon, the mountain peak of Jewish scholarship in the last 300 years. But he didn't say onomatopoeia. He said that the word Shema in the fourth parak of his commentaries in the fourth parak of Mishlei, and the first pasuk, Shimu Vanim, listen children, listen children. Shlomo Melech is speaking and is pleading, listen children. And he says over there, that the word Shema has three implications. And what I've been saying to my children is that one aspect is shh. That's what Shema means. And the Vilna Gaon says one aspect, he actually says in the reverse order, but one aspect of Shema is shh, just listening. And that's one of the valid translations here. Listen, O Israel. That means to stop doing what we're doing. There's so many different things that we're so busy with these days. Sometimes to sit and do nothing is a very, very, profound thing. I had a discussion with a young man just late last night, so busy, so distracted, so many things. The phone keeps on ringing, keeps on looking down, doesn't know who to believe, who to trust, who are my friends, who are not my friends, Shh. Let's just sit, let's just be quiet for a few minutes, let things settle. I had actually spent 50 minutes earlier in the day, 50 minutes, just sitting quietly and not doing anything, just sitting quietly. It's one of the most profound things a person can do for themselves. We don't have to wait for Shabbos, in order to accomplish this task, to shut off the phone, and to be very, very quiet, and to do nothing, and not to move, and not to be tempted to answer a phone, and not be tempted to answer the door, and just to sit and be quiet and do nothing, and to listen. And eventually, what happens is, certain ideas and certain feelings start to prioritize in the mind, and we gain clarity. Because every time we think a new thought, it's like throwing a pebble into the water, and then you throw another pebble into the water, and another pebble into the water. After a while, the waves that are coming from these pebbles and all these thoughts create all kinds of waves, and the waves are crashing against waves, and the wakes against wakes, and all of a sudden we're in an awake state, but we find that our minds are getting confused by lots of different thoughts. And sometimes the best way to settle the mind, and that's the beauty of Shabbos, is that suddenly the sudden jolt of silence that we have, the quiet walk back, changing pace and changing our tone, even changing the way we speak for one moment also. Sometimes we're speaking in a very big hurry. I'm driving here, so I'm almost speaking at the pace that I'm used to driving when I'm rushing through traffic. And then all of a sudden Shema Yisrael says, shh, slow down, you move too fast. You got to make the morning last, Okay, pardon me, I'm not going to sing any songs over here, But just changing that pace, changing the way we speak, changing the tone, even getting quiet. Found that teachers, the teacher said something very interesting to me the other day, and I admired this strategy. She said that when, instead of yelling, when the kids are getting out of control, she steps forward, she starts to speak even more quietly to the students. And that somehow that gets their attention better than raising the voice. The raising the voice they're already used to, and it becomes like background music to them. But when she whispers, they're heard when the person speaks quietly, so there's some advantage to that aspect of Shema. So that's one dimension of Shema. Another dimension of Shema is the second letter, It's the Havana, the Vilna Gaon says. It means to think and to feel and to contemplate. And as we say in English, to empathize. Empathize, to get into somebody else's universe and to feel outside of ourselves. And suddenly realize, that it's not just my feelings are not holy, but somebody else's feelings are as holy as I would like my feelings to be considered. That's the mem of Shema, is Havana, to take what you've just heard, and now to take time to think about it. Don't respond right away. There's a tendency when listening that a person suddenly wants to give a response and say, well, the same thing happened to me. And just to tell you parenthetically, I remember we did a singles event a number of years ago. A young lady who's a sort of a dating coach and a social worker, and we designed a whole morning for elder singles that were having trouble getting to a second date, and so we had blocked out certain amounts of time for each, one of the projects and each one of the different how do we call it, processes that we're working on. And one of them, said, okay, we give 15 minutes for this, where somebody sits down at the table and a young lady says something. For example, we always had, we set up a play. Each one had a chance to make this play, where she says, I had a rough day. And all he had to do was read the script and say, I heard you had a rough day. If I heard you correctly, you're telling me that you had a rough day. Just to validate somebody else's feelings, just to validate, because the feelings are real to the feeler, the other person, and this ended up taking an hour and a half because we couldn't get the fella to read the script. So, what'd you do wrong? No. Phil, read over here. I had a bad day. So I had a bad day too. You think you're the only one that's walking around suffering in this world? We all suffer. Don't answer autobiographically. Or I had a bad day. So why don't you just, smile though your heart is breaking. Put a smile on your face and nobody's looking for a cure right away. So when a person expresses themselves, I know I'm preaching to the wrong side of the choir over here, right? But when a person expresses themselves, so sometimes they're not looking for an answer right away. They're looking, that first thing is that they want to be heard and they want to be validated. Yeah, that's the most important thing. When someone comes out of the desert and they haven't had a drink and they haven't had something to eat, I explained to fellas, they haven't had a drink and haven't had something to eat for 3 days. So there's something they need first. I mean, there's something. Which one of those two is more of a primary need, right? Obviously, you need something to drink before you need something to eat, right? You don't start when a person comes out of the desert and they haven't had something to eat or drink. You don't offer them breadsticks or garlic bread or something like that. They're sitting there choking on the. You offer them a drink of water first. Have something to drink first, and then you need something. The first drink, the first need when a person expresses their feelings is that they want to be heard. They want their feelings to be felt. Later on, then what do you think? The kid threw up on the couch. Oh, the kid threw up on the couch. That's terrible. That's terrible. Not like, so get a new couch. Or so, I know a guy who cleans couches. It's not a problem. And then the same thing happened to me, and I didn't get panicked about it. Don't nullify the other person's. Hear what the other person is saying. Feel it. Yeah. And this is the art to every relationship. We'll see in a second. Even ben adam l'makam. And then finally, the last one is Shema. What does it stand for? It stands for accepting, right? Kabbalah. That's what the Vilna Gaon says. Kabbalah. I remember I said this over Sephardi Shabbaton many years ago, and when I got down, said, "Oh, Reb Leibel, say something during the meal." The few hundred people in the dining room, I stood up on a chair. A couple of people laughed. A few things. I sat down, and there was a Yemenite fellow sitting there next to me, and he said to me, "Rabbi, you're wrong." I said, "Wrong? What did I say?" I'll show you the Vilna Gaon. He says, "Wrong." He says, "What's wrong?" He says, "That's not how you pronounce ayin." They pronounce ayin, the Yemenite, and it's probably the more true pronunciation, because the truth is, why should aleph and ayin have the same, have the same, be doing the same function, aleph and ayin? So we were separated for almost 2,400 years without getting together. Theirs is probably more reflective of the true pronunciation. But we know Divrei Elokim Chaim. Their ayin sounds more. I can't even pronounce it. I'm not even going to. Maybe I'll try it. It sounds like it's guttural. It sounds like you just suddenly inhaled a ping pong ball. It sounds like suddenly it's suddenly you're saying and then suddenly you swallowed something or you got stuck.
It's not like a double. I had a Moroccan and they also pronounce it. They say I. Like it's kind of like a double.
I'm going to need a glass of tea if I try it again. So, and the truth is, I realized after he told me that he's right. Not only is he right because the Yemenite culture is away for 2,400 years, and they probably have the more true pronunciation, but he's right that the is really the most difficult part. Because everywhere I looked throughout Chumash, and I scanned through all of Chumash, and I went and I saw wherever it says the word Shema, that the Targum, the Aramaic translation of the word Shema, is Shema, is listen. Okay, how about that? Okay, that's not what I meant to say though. But whenever it says Shema B'Kol, and that's we're landing to our point over here. Whenever it says Shema B'Kol, listen to the voice, right? Listen to the voice, right? So we'll see what that means in a second. Whenever it says Shema B'Kol. So Shema B'Kol, like Ekev Asher Shemata B'Koli, because you listen to my voice. People have asked me for years, what business are you in? I tell them I'm in the Shemata business. He says, you're in the Shemata business? He says, yeah. Shemata B'Kolo, listen to his voice, and you'll listen to his voice. So Shema over here means, so it says Shema B'Kol, like it says by Sarah, Kol Asher Amar Leha Sarah Shema B'Kola. Everything that Sarah says to you, Avram was told, listen to her voice. This ain't just listen to Sarah, do what she says. Listen to her voice. So we'll see what that means in a second. So it means like this. So every time it says Shema B'Kol, it says Tikabel, like Kabbalah, Tikabel, accept Lememra, accept what's being said. So we'll find out that there's three different aspects of Shema. One is listening. Yeah, I heard. One is understanding. I understand it clearly. And then the hard part is accepting. I tell my kid, it's your turn to wash the milking dishes, this week. And she didn't do it last night, and now it's 2 nights, and it's starting to look like, it was Har Sinai last night, and tonight it's Mount Everest, it's starting to approach the ceiling. And it's your job. No one was going to do it. No one's going to do it for you. You have to take responsibility, and you have to do it. Why me? I'm in a hurry. I'm going out to my friends and babysitting, right? And you get all the resistance over there. So she's going to do it and try to slam the plates down and do it in a very, So she understood, right? She heard, she understood, but she didn't accept it, Accept it means that's the reality. There's no way to escape it. This is what a Kadosh Baruch Hu said. This is what your parents said. This is the reality. This is what I have to accept. So it starts out, you know, and then after she starts to get to the middle pile of the dishes, there's already like, you know, there's some shweki music playing in the background, and already you start to get into the action of it, and you start to see you're making a dent in the top pile, and after a while it's you know, aren't you glad that you did it after you did it? But when you start out to do it, it starts out with a right, and then it ends up elu ve'elu divrei Elokeim chayim, and those are the three dimensions of Shema, of listening. Now, what's the difference between Shema and Shema B'Kolo besides this aspect of, and this is how we start out the whole year, beside the aspect of, we were saying before, accepting, and it also works and it coordinates with the concept of accepting, is that when we say Shema B'Kol, so again, I'm preaching to the wrong side of the choir. You know, I remember at a Rosh Hashanah event a number of years ago, I want to give such an example like this, that it was a number of years ago, I was describing that I had an invitation to come to South Africa to, you know, for a seminar that was going on, and I actually went 3 times that summer to South Africa. I went to on a pre-trip in order to raise up interest and to go to people's homes and to give classes in order that people should come, you know, to the seminar. And then I went again for another trip like that. I got a lot of mileage that summer, but I ended up not using it. You know, fool what I am. Yeah? And then I went a 3rd time, and I was away for 10 days in South Africa. I came back from this event, this giant event in South Africa, and I was away. It was a seminar and some traveling and all kinds of different, and it was unbelievable. I mean, it was unbelievable. It was great. It wasn't me alone. It was a whole troop of people giving shiurim in different places and in a hotel, and it was unbelievable. And everybody in South Africa has relatives that are in Canada and America, in Australia and places like that. And some of the people said, you know, this is great, Rabbi Lamb. You know, do you think you can bring this thing? You think you can do this for my children in Australia? I'll get in touch with them. I said, yeah, get in touch with me. You know, everything can be done. Sure, why not? Okay, great. I came home after being away for 10 days. I think we had like 3 or 4 kids in diapers at the time. And as soon as I arrived at the door, my wife, you know, pushed 2 or 3 kids in my direction. And she went and collapsed onto the couch and said, you know, you got it. You know, I said, okay, great. Welcome home. You know. And now I'm busy, just sort of picking up where, she was at her, wit's end, just taking care of all the kids by herself. So what happened was, I get a call the very next day, as soon as I get back, from this participant in South Africa saying, Rabbi Lamb, I've been talking about you. They said they want you have an invitation. We want you to come to Australia. Would you go into Australia? And I said, Australia? If you thought South Africa is exotic, it takes 14 hours to fly back. I think 14 hours to fly there. That's the longest you can go unfueled, without fueling a flight, nonstop, without a plane having to stop. I mean, exotic. And now Australia, wow, And so I said, okay, but I got to check with my wife first, Always check with my wife. So I said, I'll be back in touch with you. So I went and I asked my wife. I said, dear, I think I just got a call. They want me to come now to Australia. And my wife said, sure, go to Australia. That's what she said. Sure, go to Australia. That was, so there was a fella on that Rosh Hashanah who stood up in the back, a 50-something fella who not married, never was, stood up and said, Eishes Chayil Miyimsa. Eishes Chayil Miyimsa. A woman of valor who can find. When he sat down. And I said, you think I ever went to South Africa? I ever went to Australia? I'll show you my passport. I never went to Australia. Because I heard what my wife said. The text was, if I was just reading a text message was, sure, go to Australia. No problem. But the tone, right? The intonation was, take a one-way ticket if you go. Don't come back. If you think you're going to leave me alone for another 10 days and go away to you're on an exotic trip, meeting new people and traveling around and having a great time, and I'm here, knee deep in diapers, So yeah, sure, go to Australia. So I never went to Australia because there's something over there, l'shmo l'kol shofar. The kol also means to listen to the real message and to listen to the intensity of the voice of what's being said, to tune in. So one of the things that we're being asked to do on Rosh Hashanah is to tune in and to hear the different tones and to hear different ways that something is being said in the world. To tune in to a child, to tune in. Now, I remember a number of years ago, I had a an unbelievable dream. Okay, I'm going to show you. I'm not usually, I have a number of good stories about dreams, real good dreams, amazing dreams. The things that almost prophetic, crazy. The Talmud says that a dream is 1/60th of prophecy. Every once in a while, you get, what happened in the dream is exactly what happened. I'm not going to take up the night with stories about that. But this one time also, it was Erev Rosh Hashanah. At that time, I had an early morning chavrusa, a study partner. I didn't want to say what time. I want to say an ungodly hour, but we were getting up every time we thought, by the time davening came, we were just getting warmed up, and we said, let's back it up another half hour, and another half hour, until we were getting up. It was like 4 o'clock in the morning. We were sitting there learning. It might have been even earlier. I'm still tired from that episode, those couple of years that we were learning like that. So I remember the first time we were going through this cycle, we were learning from early in the morning until Shacharis every day, and then I would go off to work. I didn't realize I was giving the lectures at night, and he was going to sleep at 8 o'clock in the night. So I was starting to become war weary. Comes Erev Rosh Hashanah, and we realize Rosh Hashanah is the whole year, so you have to really be rested. You don't want your nerves to be raw, and you don't want to be, this person didn't sleep enough, so sometimes you can be a little testy, a little bit, give too. So I said, we want to make sure that we're rested. So Erev Rosh Hashanah of all days, we decided, let's sleep in. But when a person's in a habit of getting up at a certain hour, like you get up at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the morning during the weekday, and even comes Shabbos, so you wake up and you look at the clock and you say, I got another hour, I got another 2 hours. I got the treat of a little longer sleep. So I was waking up and stirring in my mind and starting to wake up around that time that the alarm clock would usually go off. And I take a look up at and I didn't really open my eyes, but I was thinking a thought. And I started to become aware that there was a certain thought, a little pearl that was developing in my mind. And I probably would have gone back to sleep and forgotten about it altogether. But unbelievably so, a giant storm whipped up outside. Suddenly rain started pounding, and there was suddenly a flash of lightning, a lightning bolt, and a boom, an explosion. And the whole house shook. You could hear all over the neighborhood alarms from cars. Were going off because of the jolt, and the kids woke up in their sleep, and the kids were crying, and they came running in. And because I was awakened at that moment, that thought that was percolating in my mind, that little pearl, suddenly I was able to grab it, hold on to it, and the next day I went to one of my rebbeim on Erev Rosh Hashanah, and I told him, this is a crazy thought that I was thinking, and I think I understand what it means. And the thought goes like this: that Erev Rosh Hashanah, that Rosh Hashanah, when we hear the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, it's the Kriya Shema Al Mita. The shofar on Rosh Hashanah is the Kriya Shema Al Mita for the rest of the year. Right? To explain, it's not so easy. It's not so easy to get. And I remember my Rebbe at that time. He said, label. He says it's emes lemito. It's the absolute truth. Okay, so good. Okay, sometimes it's the same Rebbe. I told him I can tell you some beautiful Divrei Torah that I came up with, and he told me, Purim Torah label. Save it for Purim, So the best stuff that I thought when I was a bacher, I said, and I tell over my kids, they say, wow, but that is like, onus. Like, where'd you, And I said over to this rabbi, he told me, Purim Torah. Save it for Purim. I had a whole, sleeve of those things, But this, he told me, emes lemito. I said, okay, so that I'll take it. He was usually very critical on things, on anything that I had to present to him. So what does it mean that the shofar on Rosh Hashanah is the Kriya Shema Al Mita for the rest of the year? Let's understand that when we say Kriya Shema before we go to sleep, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. So part of the reason why we say Shema is in order that when we go to sleep at night, that we're not disconnected and we just don't fall asleep in an animalistic way, and suddenly we wake up and say, oh yeah, and by the way, I have an avoda to do. It's like a little bit like if a person goes on a trip to, let's say, a hotel. They go to a business trip or some special event, and they have to wake up the next morning. The whole purpose of the trip is, I'm here in California, I'm here in Alaska, I'm here in South Africa, in order that tomorrow morning I have to, be up at a conference at 7 o'clock in the morning or something like that. I have to be there. So I'm a little bit jet lagged, I'm in Eretz Israel or whatever, but I'm going to set the alarm clock so I wake up tomorrow morning. Now, I just don't set the alarm clock in a hotel and hope that it's going to wake me up, because I'm missing two important pieces of information. Number one, before I turn over and go to sleep, I set off the alarm clock. Right? I set it for, if it's midnight, I set it off 1 minute to midnight. I make sure that it goes off at midnight. I want to hear it because for two reasons. Number one, I want to hear what the sound of the alarm clock is, because I know that that's the one that I'm going to be responding to, tomorrow morning at 6:30 or 7 o'clock in the morning. That's the sound that I'm going to respond to. I have to be alert to it, because otherwise there's the genius of the human mind is we're able to integrate it into a dream, and to make it sound like if it's a bird chirping, it sounds like there's a bird chirping in the window, and I have a whole big dream and a whole big imagination about a bird sitting in a window, and suddenly it becomes part of the dream sequence. But if I know and I preset my mind that that's the sound that I'm going to be responding to, boom, then all of a sudden I can find myself able to wake up and to get into action. Yeah, that's the beauty of it. And the other thing is I just want to make sure that it works also. I can't sleep at night not knowing if the alarm clock is actually going to go off in the morning. So I have to make sure that the machine functions. And number two, I want to tune my ear into the sound of what it's going to be like. So I want to say that the shofar that we're listening is not only a mitzvah for the day of Rosh Hashanah, but it's a mitzvah to hear the sound and to tune into sound, to hear that's the sound that we're going to be hearing throughout the entire year. Right? So now the question is, we have to get a poetic license over here. Okay? I've had my license revoked already, so I'm going to rely a little bit on your poetic license. Where do we hear the sound of the shofar throughout the rest of the year? Right? Right? So when a person goes to sleep, we listen to the sound of the shofar of Rosh Hashanah, knowing full well that we're not going to, it says wake up, the shofar says wake up, but we're not going to be awake fully the whole year. It's just to tune us in, just in case when I go back to sleep and I sort of lose my, I lose my direction, that somehow, like they have these little grooves on the side of the road on the Palisades Interstate Parkway. Suddenly, if a person was dozing over there, that's the sound that's supposed to, sort of bring us back and alert us to wake up. So where do we hear the sound of the shofar throughout the rest of the year? Yeah? In some of the primary places. First of all, there's the old alarm clock, right? Right? You have the different types of alarm clocks, and those are the different sounds that the shofar makes also. You have those little chirping alarm clocks. In the morning, you hear different, sometimes you hear, different kids left the house and the alarm clock is still going on, or it got up later, or they're still sleeping, and the alarm clock is still, integrated into their dreams already. And then you got these other alarm clocks that are wah, 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 and you got the other one, you got the big buzzer. Those are the same sounds that we hear, the same. So what does it say? It says that there's a new day dawning. Here's a new opportunity. I used to tell prisoners all the time when we wake up in the morning and we say, Moda ani lefanecha, melechai v'kayim shechazarta bi nishmasi b'chemla rabbe emunasecha. Great is your emunah. We give a Kadosh Baruch Hu praise. Great is your emunah. I'm sure most people know this concept over here. What do you mean, great is your emunah? Kadosh Baruch Hu has emunah. Emunah, we would imagine, comes that somebody has a lack of understanding, and therefore they have to maybe fill in. That's one basic understanding of emunah. We have to fill in wherever our understanding is lacking. And so how do we say that Kadosh Baruch Hu has great emunah? Actually, emunah means trust. The fact that Kadosh Baruch Hu trusted us with a new day and He gave us a neshama back, He laundered, our neshama while we were sleeping and gave it back feeling fresh and revived again, So Rabba Munasecha, I guess if you gave me a new day, you trust I'm going to do the right thing with it, Here's the keys to the car. Here's the neshama again. You're going to do the right thing. Rabba Munasecha. So a new day has dawned. So we hear the alarm clock, it tells us. Right? Anytime we also hear that there's an alarm clock going off someplace. Not an alarm clock, I'm sorry. Who knows the secret of these sounds? The people who were in the business, the police department and the fire department and all the emergency personnel, they all know these sounds. Wah, wah, wah. Sometimes you get behind an emergency vehicle and there's this thick traffic and they push behind you, and sometimes it's you also hear that incredible push behind, so those are the same sounds. It tells us there's an emergency going on. There's something, there's danger. This Thursday night happens to be the yurt site of a close friend of mine. We had last year Hurricane Irene. Was the name of the hurricane that sort of rumbled through our section last year? I think it was Hurricane. I think it was Irene. That's yeah. There was Katrina, and then it was later. I think it was Irene. Whatever it was, whatever lady's name it was. Okay, sorry. So there was a hurricane that came last year, a few days before Elul, and there was a young man on our block who was electrocuted, you know, right about three, four doors down. My wife and I were getting into our car. We said, listen, right before Elul, we have a chance to get away. We're getting into the car. I had two married children that were home. And I said, you guys will take care of everything. We're going to go away. We couldn't get out. The roads were blocked. And then we hear that there was a terrible emergency down the block. And next thing you know, they have a room filled, you know, larger than this. And one of my rebbeim called up and says, Label, we want you to say a hesped for Moshe Yosef. Moshe, he ran into the water where there was and pulled a wire where a little kid was touching a fence that was attached to a wire from the water, and he himself got electrocuted, and it's terrible. It was an alarm. So it turns out that he was a sign maker, this fellow, you know. So in 1 or 2 minutes that I had, you know, to summarize, you can't summarize a person's life in 2 minutes, but he had done an act of incredible heroism. He went to go save a Jewish child who was entangled by a wire. I said, very few people know here that his profession was he had a business. He was a sign maker. What's the sign? You know, this was his last sign that he made, you know. Go help a Jewish child that's entangled in a wire. You know, we don't have to tell you nowadays, there's so much that's been said. We had a nasifa, you know, Jewish kids can plug themselves into, and with the click of a button, you know, or with a movement of the mouse, suddenly, you know, they can find themselves in a place where they're in mortal danger. You know, that's not necessarily, you know, a pashtus what was happening in that particular situation, but it shows you the power of that light, the power of that electricity. You know, a benign wire that's hanging down suddenly falls into the wrong situation, and it can become dangerous. It can become, you know, a point of electrocution. Right? There's other places where we hear these same sounds, you know, over and over again. There's too many to name. But I'll just give another couple of brief examples. I remember when I was a bacher in yeshiva. And again, we're talking about, you know, hearing the shofar in different places. Before I was a bacher in yeshiva, I'll tell you about something that happened to me when I was first starting out. And I know a couple of people here have heard, and I'm not going to tell over a whole story over here, but I went to public school. You know, I was an all-American kid. I was captain of the high school football team, captain of the high school basketball team, captain of the high school baseball team, and I ended up swerving into yeshiva when I was after college, in my early 20s. And I remember that I was going to a shul in Midtown Manhattan, and I ended up, you know, the rabbi gave me, I think it was a Hertz Chumash. You know, everybody, maybe some people remember that before the art scroll, you know, there was the Birnbaum Siddur, you know, with the archaic English on the side, and it was the Hertz Chumash that had, you know, frequent commentaries from St. Thomas Aquinas and whatever like that. It was a little bit of a, you know, but that was the standard, you know, whatever conservadox Chumash. And you know, I remember one time, you know, I had been bar mitzvah, so I knew how to read a little bit in Kroll and Hebrew. So I remember one time, I'm in my early 20s. I opened up, you know, to the first page. I was living in Manhattan at the time in a fancy apartment, and I clicked on a light at this desk, and I said, I'm going to take the time. And I was reading, always going to the shul. I was always reading along in English, and I said, I want to sit back. I want to try to read some of the words in Hebrew. I started reading the words in Hebrew. This is the phenomena that happened. I start reading the words in Hebrew. As I'm reading the words in Hebrew, suddenly I start to feel that my heart is pounding. I'm reading the word Bereshis, Bara, Elokim, Eis Hashemayim. Suddenly I feel like, oh my gosh, you know, I'm breathing like in a weird way. Like, you know, am I having a, you know, is this a cardiac event over here? You know, should I call 911? You know, but I didn't feel any pain or any pressure. But I just started to feel like, you know, like something was. I didn't understand what happened. And I parked the event. I didn't understand it, you know. After a while, you know, I read a few sentences, you know, and I stepped away from it. But it wasn't painful. Actually, it was, you know, kind of a good feeling, but it was different. It was a different type of feeling. Years later, I find myself in yeshiva, and one of the things that we used to do, my grandmother had passed away my first couple of months in yeshiva, and I was very close with her. You know, I used to go visit her, and I felt like, you know, I wanted to go to the nursing home after that. We used to go every Erev Shabbos until I was a chassan. You know, we used to go for like 4+ years. We used to go every Erev Shabbos, and I used to take the Rebbeim's children and some other fellows, a couple of guys played guitar, and we'd go to 3 or 4 different rooms in the local nursing home, and we'd say hello to people and sing Shalom Aleichem, and people in the you know, the Erev Shabbos of their life, you know, we'd sing Shalom Aleichem to them and say hello to them and ask them how they're doing. And there was one lady, she was not an elderly lady, but she was, had been a stroke victim. And I used to see her boys, sometimes when I would drive my Rebbe back home, I see him, this lady, that her children, she had young children, young Talmidei Chachamim, they would walk her home for lunch, and they would bring her back. They were taking care of her, and bringing her back and forth from home, from the local nursing home. So, so went to visit, after going to say hello to people, I went over to say, how are you doing? And she was going, And remember the Haitian nurse told me, leave her alone, she's bitter, leave her alone, she's bitter. And I said, no, she's trying to tell me something. She's really trying to say something. I said, maybe she wants to, be near the elevator where her children come. She wants to face the elevator. So I turned her chair around so she could, wait, maybe her children are going to come, and that's what she's looking for. She was trying to get a message across, but everybody was ignoring her. And finally I faced her and she was giving like I said, what is it? And then the nurse was telling me, leave her alone, no, we're just, and I said, no, she's trying to say something. And then I remember I see that her watch on her frail hand had switched around, and she wants to know when her boys are coming. She wants to face the elevator, but she wants to know when they're coming so she could look down. And I turned her watch around. And I remember she kissed my hand. She goes, oh. I said, okay, I don't know if and she was crying, tears of joy. And I said, wow, I got it. I figured out what it was that she wanted, And then when I left that event, I remind myself of that. What happened was when I sat down to learn that piece of Chumash over there, and finally I started saying those words. After 23 plus years, I started sitting down and saying the words Bereshis, Bara, Elokim, Eis HaShamayim, and suddenly I started to realize that my neshama was clapping inside, and the neshama is saying, I'm trying all these years to get you to say the right thing, to say these holy words over here, because what is the Torah? The Torah is the language of the neshama, right? That's what it is. It's an amplification of the neshama. Barasi Yetzirah, Barasi Lo Torah Tavlin. What does it mean? It's that's some kind of a party line. It means that the Torah is the implication of the voice of what the neshama wants to say, and the neshama starts to clamor inside, says, "That's what I've been trying to get you to say. That's what I've been trying to get you to tune into all of these years, and finally you're doing it." The neshama was going, "Yes, you're doing that. You're doing the right thing. Finally, I want to catch you doing the right thing." And therefore, I felt there was a clapping and a clamoring and an excitement that goes on. The same thing with the blowing of the shofar that happens throughout the whole year. There's also it's a stimulation of the neshama, right? That's the whole premise. So we hear the blowing of the shofar throughout the year at all these different events. We can go through a lot of other different types of situations where we know that we hear the shofar blowing. Maybe I'll go visit South Africa again. And I remember one time when I was a really young fella, we went to Kruger National Park in South Africa. South Africa has a park that's about the size of New Jersey, the size of Israel. And they got 400 lions over there. I was like a 17-year-old fella, and I had gone actually on a American Field Service for a summer to South Africa. And we spent over there, the people are living in the cages, and the animals are roaming, born free. And now the whole country is like that, basically. And so what happened was, so after being there for almost a full week, so the big prize was if you happened to espy a lion. There was no lions. We didn't see any lions. Okay, so 400 lions in a park that's the size of New Jersey, so it's not likely you're going to find a lion over there. Okay, so we're ready to leave, and as we're leaving, suddenly we see that the jungle started going wild. The monkeys started jumping up in the trees, and they went off like alarms. And they started screaming. And suddenly there was a stampede of kudo and a stampede of zebra that were running across. We parked our car because they would have just run right over the car. And we just sort of hunkered down, like, what's going on over here? Like there's an emergency going on, like there's a fire. And suddenly people are panicking and stampeding, and all the animals are stampeding, where there was a water hole where the animals were sitting calmly and just drinking, and all the birds and all the monkeys were just, sort of moving around them. Suddenly everybody started scattering, like there's a policeman coming and there's a card game going on or something like that. Suddenly, the what do you call it, squad, the Vice Squad arrived to break up the card game, or the Easy Speak in the times of the Prohibition, and suddenly, everything got quiet in the jungle after the birds, and there was a moment of silence, and all of a sudden, out in front of the car that we were driving, strides out of the jungle, out of the little forest jungle, steps out a female lion. You know, she's the one that's clean shaven, you know, and she's got like a little pocketbook over her shoulder with a credit card, you know, and she's out for the hunt. The woman is the one that does the hunting. She does the shopping. She's nothing different than in the animal kingdom, you know, and she's out there walking like, you know, very princess-like, and then 10 or 15 feet behind her comes lumbering with the big beard, the Rosh Hashiva, you know. Suddenly comes, you know, the lion, the Tata lion, you know, with the Grace board, you know, with the bigger, you know, and he's lumbering by, and he's hungry. He wants lunch, and they both want lunch, and the lottery is on, you know. The lion only is going to eat what it needs. It's not coming out to shop and to take every zebra and every deer and every antlered animal. And the place was going wild. And when these two step out onto the plain, the whole place was going wild. And then now everybody was hiding for those few minutes. And then we followed behind for like 10, 15 minutes. We had a whole row of cars behind us, but we were like the closest one from us to that camera over there. And we were just following behind. And then they turned back into the woods. We turned off our engine and everybody opened up their windows. And a few minutes later, you hear a big roar, you know. They got their man, you know, whatever it is. They got their little zebra, and all of a sudden everybody relaxed and starts walking back. All the animals start walking in very relaxed fashion back to the watering hole over there. I never forget the fear and the pachad that the lion put into that made these animals, and especially the monkeys. They were like the ones that were announcing that there's danger, that there's something fearsome, there's something frightening that's going on over here. So these are the sounds. You know, living in Brooklyn, you hear these sounds. You hear that there's emergencies going on, that there's things that are happening over here, and they're meant to stir our consciousness and meant to wake us up that there's something that's happening. There's a responsibility. Even the sound of a baby crying. The baby knows the sound of the shofar all too well, right? How does a baby cry? Right? It's the same, you know, the same three, the sobbing sound, you know, it's the sound of a crying, right? No different. That's what it's all about. Baby knows it. Even when people laugh, I have to say also, if you listen to somebody laughing, I'm not going to imitate it too much over here. Right? People laughing, you know, having a good hysterical laugh. It's also the sound of the shofar in a happy way. Why? Because the second pasuk in Mishlei, in Tehillim says, Yoshev b'shamayim yischol. The one who sits in heaven laughs. The world is a comedy scene over here to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what makes something humorous, is when somebody suddenly gets a divine perspective and sees something that looks ordinary, looks from our perspective over here, and then for you suddenly change your perspective and you see how foolish and how ridiculous something is. One of my boys told me the story about an elderly fellow who was ambulating down his little suburban street. And he happened to notice there's a nice picket fence in front of this one house. There was a little gate swung open, and his little boy, and he's about 8 or 6 inches short of the doorbell, and he's jumping up and trying to push the doorbell. So this elderly man says, "Okay, fine." He turns down, you know, he walks up down the walkway, walks up to the steps, and reaches above the boy, you know, those extra 9 inches where he can reach. Bing, bong. He rings the doorbell. He says to the boy, he says, "Now what?" The boy says, "Now we run like anything." You know? So we're watching from one perspective, you know, from down here, and then suddenly a person takes a little look above, and you realize, you know, that there's so many human foibles, there's so many silly things that we do that until we catch the divine perspective, until we see the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks at things, then that becomes the funny thing. You know, from down here we're taking things ultra seriously, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes a look, and sometimes we're doing, that's the name Yitzchak means. What does Yitzchak mean? That he will laugh in the end. That the one who laughs last laughs best. He's laughing at his Yetzer Hara. It could be that the Yetzer Hara is testing him and pushing him and beating him up on whole life, and he has to say no, 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 no. But in the end, he's going to have the laugh. He's going to have the last laugh. They say the Yetzer Hara comes along to a person and says, "Here, try some of this, try some of this, try some of this, try some of this." And the person says, "Oh, okay, okay, okay." And he gets the person flipping channels and looking and clicking and looking and flipping and looking all the time until he gets the end and says, "What was it?" There was nothing there. Right? Sometimes it takes a person all through the night, and takes a person all through their youth, and sometimes it takes a person all through their whole life. Offering them the next thing, Hakina, Hataiva, Hakavod. What's the next thing that's going to take a person that escorts the person out of the world? Until he gets to the end, he says, "It was all nothing." I think it was Jacqueline Onassis. I saw a book that says about people's last phrases that they said, the last words. She said, "All those sit-ups for nothing." Right? Just to be able to fit into a size, 4 or whatever it is, dress, whatever, all those sit-ups for nothing. Hevel chavolim. Amr Hakalas Hakol Hevel. That's what she came to realize after all is said and done. Maybe I should have done a little bit more chesed. Maybe I should have been mavakesh HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Maybe I should have, davened. I don't know, whatever regrets, a person can have at that point. So the truth is that there's a neshama in the world. We had a beautiful Gemara in Daf Yomi just the other day that says that David Melch says in the Chamishe Barchi Nafshi, says 5 times Barchi Nafshi, and what are these 5 Barchi Nafshis refer to? He says the correspondence between the neshama and the neshama, the soul, and a Kadosh Baruch Hu. And it says just like the neshama, he says, just like a Kadosh Baruch Hu fills up the whole world, Kadosh, 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 Hashem Svakos Malach Al Haaretz Kavodo. Wow. Right? That's what we say. Hashem's fill up the whole world. The world is not, where's Hashem? The world is dense with Hashem. It's a world dense with meaning. Well, I can explain it. I can demonstrate it. Right? If you like, I can demonstrate it. The same way, so the neshama fills up the whole body. It says just like the neshama is a roa, Hashem is a roa ve'enu nira, like tinted windows. So you have people drive by, they can see you, but you can't see them. So the neshama sees, and it's not seen. So there's a correspondence between the neshama of a person. Why? Because the Kadosh Baruch Hu v'yipach bapav nishmas chayim. That's really what's going on. That's the choral reading between the neshama, anila dodi v'dodi li, that we're going to be opening up to in the month of Elul. That's the chorus between the neshama that a Kadosh Baruch Hu put into us. That when he said nasa adam b'tzelmeinu, Kadosh Baruch Hu breathed the breath of life into man. V'yipach bapav nishmas chayim. And on Rosh Hashanah, we're actually coming back to commemorate and to justify that breath that a Kadosh Baruch Hu put into man, that gave us a chelik Elokai mimal mamish, put into us an eternal piece of breath. And that piece of breath is looking for and trying to find its purpose and trying to find its meaning. If a person would get quiet enough and deep enough, we can find that the neshama, sometimes we think we want pizza pie. Sometimes we think we want, candy. Sometimes we think we want movie. We want the chiddush. The real chiddush, the real novelty that we're looking for is hamachadash betuva b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh bereishis, is kirbas elokim litov, is that the neshama is looking to come back and come close to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. And what does a Kadosh Baruch Hu want in the world? That a Kadosh Baruch Hu wants, that he wants to draw close. That's one of the reasons why, by the way, we've mentioned before, that Jews shuckle. If you ever noticed that Jews and crazy people shuckle. Right? Why do Jews shuckle? So one explanation the Zohar says is because it's like the Ner Elokim Nishmas Adam. The candle of a Kadosh Baruch Hu is the neshama of a person. And the neshama wants to go back to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. And just even like a candle that wants to go back to its source, it wants to go back to the sun. Even though he knows when he's going to get into the sun, he's going to get lost. He's going to be nullified in the just the grandness and the vastness and the intensity of the sun. So the person says, I don't care. I'm ready to go back. I'm ready to merge. I want my soul and I want my neshama to go back to its source. That's why when someone gets sort of stimulated in a ruchnistic way, that suddenly they have this instinctive reaction. Jews have an instinctive reaction that they begin to shuckle. Isn't that a beautiful idea? Someone else explained to me that also we shuckle, we go back and forth, because part of it is I want to draw close, Avinu, but then we back off, Malkeinu, Ahava, Yira, Ahava. I want to draw close to Kadosh Baruch Hu, but then we said, okay, let's back off. Let's not be like the moth that flies into the fire or flies into the light and gets burnt, and gets destroyed in the process. We want to come close, but we know that we dare not come too close. So what's that? Ratzav Hashav, right? The person who draws close, the angels, but then they back off and they realize, don't draw too close. So really, the whole purpose of Rosh Hashanah and the whole purpose of blowing the shofar is to stimulate, and that neshama is to wake up the neshama and to stir. He says, "Usruas melech bo," that the ratzon of the king is within us. That means a Kadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael deraisa v'kudsha brichu chadhu. Kadosh Baruch Hu put a neshama into us, and the neshama wants to perform 613 mitzvahs. It could be that the Zohar says that there's not 613 mitzvahs, there's 613 pieces of advice. That's what the Torah says. That's what the Zohar says. Okay, so the Zohar is talking in neshama language. To the body, it's 613 mitzvahs, because the body is heavy, and the body is subject to the weights of gravity, and the body is resistant, and therefore it's a training program. Get up and get and face the day and do what you got to do. Come on now, hey, So it's a training program. So the body, it's commandments. To the neshama, to the soul, it's 613 pieces of advice, and the only real mitzvah is B'charta b'chayim, choose life. Interesting. I don't know if anybody made it to the Siyam HaShas. Anybody made it to the Siyam HaShas? Okay. I just watched the little review of the Simon Tov and Mazel Tov, the dancing. It was just unbelievable. It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. Baruch Hashem. And I'm glad, I have to say, that I was glad, I didn't understand everything, but I stayed with it every day, and I went through daf after daf. My 9-year-old son, who sat next to me, I had my other little boys with me also years ago, and now they're sitting there already now in their 20-something, and they've gone already 3 times, with me. My 9-year-old son, when they announced the next one is going to be in November and a date 7.5 years from now. So I said, you'll be almost 17 then, So since then, Baruch Hashem, he started learning Daf Yomi, But one of my, observations that I made over there is that the biggest sign in the whole place at Gedolim Stadium, Giant Stadium over there, where the Giants, the Gedolim, were on the field, right? And you could see them, in large screen. My sort of cute observation was, the biggest sign in the place was Met Life. Right, yeah. Met Life. Met means death. And life means life, right? Met means, that, okay, it's an English, so met is, that one had to be hinted at, that's met, that means that. But life, met life, as if to say, Nasati Lifanecha Hayom, I put in front of you today, Chaim v'Mabas, life and death, Ubacharta b'Chaim, and choose life. Let the neshama lead. When the neshama leads, when the neshama is strong, when the voice, the shofar starts out as a small narrow place, and then it expands, and we want it to fill up the Yitaka b'shofar gadol. Right? We want the shofar to be. We want the voice of the neshama. We want the voice of the Torah within us. We want the voice of that part that agrees and wants to do the Ratzon Hashem. That's what we're trying to amplify. When we say Natana Sanatoka, we talk about the Kol D'Mamadaka, that small thin voice of the conscience, which is starved, which is hidden, it remains, it's suffocated during the year. Now, when a person goes and he eats something he shouldn't eat, so it shrinks a little bit more. And when he watches something he shouldn't watch, it even gets even smaller, and but it doesn't go away, and he turns up the music a little louder, and you move around a little faster, and you hope that maybe and it only gets more. It never goes out completely unless the person achieves kares, which means to be cut off, and they don't hear that voice anymore. That's what happens. That's what kares is. But as long as the person's alive, then we hear that little voice, we hear that little murmuring of the neshama inside, and that's what we want to try to amplify actively. That's what it means, l'shmo l'kol shofar, to hear what the voice, to hear what the tone of the shofar is. That's the voice that was breathed in at the beginning of history. That's the voice, that golden thread that appears later on when Yaakov Avinu, when Yitzchak and Abraham marched together to Har Moriah, to the Akedah. That's the same voice, that's the same tone, that's the same intensity and original intention that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had when we came to Har Sinai, and that's the same one, V'yataka b'shofar gadol, that comes at the end of history, when everybody gets it, when everybody understands, and the world becomes a neshama universe rather than a physical universe that happens to have a neshama. It becomes a neshama that happens to have a goof. With that having been said, I'm going to read you 2 poems. One of them was written by a friend of mine. He wrote his song. He has a beautiful, beautiful album that's called Wayward Ram. I'll just have to finish up with this because I want to give Rabbi Miller all his time due. I apologize. Chaim Salinger. You can look up his songs. Chaim Salinger. Great songs. Almost too nice to describe. I'm his #1 fan. And I just can't say enough about the words and how beautifully they match. He has a song Kosher Food. He has a song about German. Unbelievable stuff. This one's the title song called Wayward Ram, and he brings on the Medrash Rabbah that says after being told not to slaughter his son Yitzchak, Abram raises his eyes and he sees a ram. Afterwards, an afterthought. What is achar? So the Medrash says, after many generations, the people of Israel will be in the grip of transgressions, tangled in troubles. And he says their horns will, in materialism, they'll be tangled in the materialism, he says, and they will be redeemed by the ram's horn. So the same thing that got them into trouble, that's going to redeem them. Somehow the ram's horn plays a double. And he says like this, and I'm going to read you a second poem after this by my favorite author. It's a nice soft suicide. After what we've discussed, now we can understand. It's a nice soft suicide. We are grinning as we go. We've been taken for a ride, but to where we do not know. Go and find the human heart's in exile. And so we say we're doing fine, occupied in our own decline. And there we sit in a frozen mood, shattering in pieces, filling up on foreign food, but funny how the hunger never ceases. Through the vanities of time and the platitudes of youth, we are wasted in our prime and we can't afford the truth. Tangled in the thicket like the horns of a wayward ram. Listen well and you'll hear that horn a-blowing, calling to the soul of man. You can build a tower tall, you can make yourself the king. And though the hand of man is small, he can do most anything. With every strange success we own, we say we're unassisted, and though history moves in a logical flow, and we say that we're exempted. And when the physical shell gets thicker, so you see the spark inside getting sicker. So we move around a little quicker, employing every diversion that's invented. In an artificial light, everything appears the same. There's no wrong and there's no right. Only thrills to ease the pain. Tangled in the thicket like the horns of a wayward ram. Listen well, and you'll hear that horn a-blowing, calling to the soul of man. Float around on a lavender cloud, thinking nothing serious, when suddenly you're on the ground in ways that seem mysterious, to modify the crooked lines, to clarify the alibis, and whereupon you realize that the bridge is rather narrow and precarious. It's a nice soft suicide. You know, that's what he says, that the person gets so tangled and so lost that suddenly, but the voice and the shofar is what ultimately rescues us and brings us back to our senses. And here's a poem I wrote for the Hebrew day school kids when I was 26 years ago, and it's called Wake Up. My favorite author, me. Okay. The sound of the shofar woke me up from my sleep, like the light of the Zohar to a place dark and deep. Like a baby's crying, I looked for the source. I stood from my lying with an uncommon force. I tripped and I stumbled in search of the sound until I was humbled, and then I was found. In the Shul Yom Hadin, as I started to weep, the sound from within was a sound so deep. It was a sound of fear mixed with elation, that Mashiach's here since the time of creation. He only waits to be woken from his long deep sleep by a sound long and broken that sounds like a weep. Hashem is our king, that's the cry. Now let Mashiach's alarm ring and split the sky. Okay, thank you very much for listening, everybody. And I wish that Bez Hashem this year we should hear a great, great amplification of the Yitaka b'Shofar Gadol. We should hear the great shofar within and the great shofar for the rest of the world from without. Bez Hashem, thank you so much.